Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Book Passage. My name is Jonathan Spencer. I am the assistant manager here at the store and also a proud member of our events team. I was just telling Alison backstage that my favorite thing to do here at the store is to meet the authors and the wonderful fans who come. I learn something new every single time. It's the best part of being a bookseller. I'm going to start with a quote. Mark Twain wrote that most conversations are monologues in the presence of witnesses. Now, that has the virtue of being both a witty quote from a notable humorist and a conversation starter that is actually about conversations. So pity my poor dinner companion over Valentine's Day this next week. But I am hopeful tonight's guest will help me up my game. This evening, it's a pleasure to welcome Alison Wood Brooks, who is joining us to celebrate the publication of her new book, Talk, The Science of Conversation and the Art of Being Ourselves, an insightful, revealing look at the architecture of conversation that aims to provide both confidence and guidance in what one fellow writer called the most important skill you possess. And what would a conversation about conversations be without our friend Michael Lewis? Michael has been Book Passage's go-to talker over the past few days. On Monday, he interviewed MSNBC's Chris Hayes for us. On Tuesday, he braved that storm to share the stage with celebrated author Geraldine Brooks. And tonight, he is here to talk about the very skill he's been exercising all week. Dr. Alison Wood Brooks is the O'Brien Associate Professor of Business Administration and Hellman Faculty Fellow at Harvard Business School. She studies the behavioral science of conversation, teaches an award-winning course in the MBA curriculum called Talk, and chairs a program for executives called Communicating for Impact. Michael Lewis is a New York Times bestselling author who has written about everything from politics to Wall Street to baseball. He's also the creator and host of the popular podcast Against the Rules, an examination of what's happened to fairness in American life through the lens of people who depend on public trust. And we wanted to take just a moment to mention that his upcoming book, coming out on March 18th, Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service, is really something special and topical. Features essays by Michael as well as Dave Eggers, Geraldine Brooks, and Sarah Vowell, among many, many others. And there is no more important topic in today's conversation about our current moment. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you. Are we better like this? Or are we better like this? First or second? First. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. So I want to start first. We're going to talk about how this book came about, and then we're going to do some things here together. But first, we were just asked backstage how we know each other, how we met, and it was very memorable for me. I think it was more memorable for me than it was for you.
You tell your version, Michael.
So I was working on a book that I just loved. It was kind of an odd book for me called The Undoing Project, and it was about two Israeli psychologists named Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Thinking Fast and Slow, Danny Kahneman. And they had spawned a small army of disciples, people who did work in psychology that sort of rhyme with theirs. And one of them was a fellow named Mike Norton, who's a colleague of Alison's at the Harvard Business School. And Mike called me up and said, we're going to start this fellowship program where we bring in outsiders and you're going to just be a kind of like hang with us for a couple of days. It was essentially a 2-day party, right? And or 3-day party. And I was going to be one of many. And I remember he thought Louis C.K. was going to be the second one, which dates this a little bit, right?
Yes.
And all I know is that this is going to sound like bullshit because of the topic of the book. I spent 2.5 days, in the best conversations I had ever had. Dinner parties, lunches, just times. It was just, we started talking and we didn't stop. And it was so much fun. I just fell in love with all of them. And she was one of the people I fell in love with. So that's my memory. But you were pregnant at the time.
Oh my goodness.
So you weren't in fighting shape.
No,
but you were still. What is your memory of it?
That's the origin of the story for sure.
Yeah.
And then there were occasions for you to continue visit. Then the book came out, and you came back and gave a book talk.
That's
and
right.
So Michael was periodically visiting us in Boston, and we would get dinner, and you know how friendships continue on. Then your daughter became an undergrad at Harvard, which gave him occasion to come and visit us regularly over time,
Right.
which has just been fabulous.
And Alison's been a guest on my podcast. I can't even remember how we worked. We had a season on coaching. That's right.
Yeah.
And I found it curious. I didn't know exactly what each of these charming people did. I knew that they were all psychologists and they were doing interesting research. But then it eventually emerges that Alison is teaching a class. I mean, the way I saw it was trying to teach Harvard Business School students how to be charming. And which I thought was like, I thought two things, Coles to Newcastle. Like, do they need that too? You know, it's like they have every other advantage. Do they really need to be schooled up like this? And you said, well, actually, they have a lot of problems.
Yeah. They do need it, guys. They do.
But it was just this idea of teaching people how to have a conversation. And I'm going to say, I'm going to try to shut up for a lot of this, and be a better conversationalist than I usually am. And I won't monologue, but
we'll see.
I know, we'll see. But the subject resonates with me. Yeah. I grew up in New Orleans, and New Orleans is a very conversational town. It starts with just passing on the streets when you pass someone. There's kind of a rule: you have to acknowledge them. You don't do this thing where you walk by the person on the street and don't acknowledge that they exist, which in Berkeley they do. And so it starts with a little bit, and every encounter is a kind of improv routine, and you learn just naturally how to kind of keep something going. Plus, it's the drinkingest town in America, so it's all lubricated.
That helps.
It helps. It's all lubricated. So having gone from that into East Coast, success world, I was jarred by how inept people were. So in this activity, and how it was a bit like being a European soccer player coming to America. You had these tools that you were given from the culture you came from, and that other people didn't have them. But the idea that you could break it down into a science, that was really interesting to me. And so I want to, before we do what I want you to do to start, I do want to just explain a little bit how your class came to be, and just never mind what I said about it. What you're trying to do in this class with these people.
Yeah. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening to be here and listen to us gab with each other. I'm Alison, and I'm a behavioral scientist. I've been studying psychology and economics and for almost 20 years. And so I started out by studying people's emotions, how people feel anxiety, sadness, anger, excitement in grad school. And at some point I realized, well, I'm not just studying how people feel, but how they talk about their feelings with other people. And then I got to a point where I realized, wait a second, there's whole fields of social psychology, of communications, and very few people have actually gone to the trouble of recording real people talking to real people, especially at large scale. Probably because we've been limited by technology. It was just hard to do that across large swaths of real conversations. And so my interest shifted from studying how people talk about their feelings to studying how people talk about everything. And since that moment and that epiphany, it's really been like drinking from a fire hydrant. We have so much to learn about human-to-human interaction, and I really feel lucky to be on the forefront of it. So we started to learn enough, and I was like, wait a second. I think our students need to learn this. I'd been recruited to Harvard to teach negotiation, which is a classic course that every business school, every law school has. It's a great class. I don't know if people who are already very strategic need to be taught to be more strategic. And I always felt like the aperture of what we're teaching people in a negotiation class is quite narrow. It's sort of like, okay, we're aiming to expand the size of a pie and claim a larger piece of the pie. But what about like fun? What about connection? What about the importance of privacy? What about persuasion, right? So all of this wider aperture of goals that people care about.
Let me stop you for a second. When does it occur to you that this is something we need to teach them?
Yeah.
Like what is the research yielding where you go, was there a moment or was there a thing where you just said, well, this is actually a body of knowledge that can be imparted? What was it?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of little scientists of conversation. We learn to do it ourselves when we're toddlers, and we spend all day doing it with a huge array of partners. At some point, and maybe you've all realized this too, you realize, wait, there are some people who are awesome at this and other people who seem to really be struggling. Can we teach those people to do it better? Is this an innate talent that they're born with, or is it something teachable? as a behavioral scientist, the aha moment was we started doing experiments where, we can teach people to do this better. You randomly assign some people to ask more questions than others, and all of a sudden everybody likes them more.
Is that right?
Yes.
All you got to do is ask questions.
More questions.
And there's no limit to this.
It's hard to get to the limit. Yeah, it's hard to get to the limit.
You're sure about that?
I'm sure.
How sure are you?
So sure.
I don't know. I don't think you don't look sure. Are you?
I'm
feel
getting
really
excited
sure?
even just talking about it now.
I think I can get to the limit in about 6 seconds. but we all know the feeling of being interrogated.
Yeah.
There's got to be a point. But it is true. You're right. Asking questions is talk is an acronym, and A is ask.
I think that we should try this together.
Okay. Yes. Let's do. That's we'll cue up.
Yes.
So this is one of the things that's in the book is some of the little sort of experiments that she does with her students. And I thought I've never seen them. I want to see them done. Yeah. And so we're going to do them here. We're going to do one in the beginning, and maybe we're going to come back to it at the end.
Yeah. You guys up for it? Yeah, they're easy. So easy. The first one is called never-ending follow-ups, okay? And it is this idea of, can you ask too many questions? What does it feel like to be asked a lot of questions in a casual conversation? So I'm going to ask you to turn to one person near you, introduce yourself, say hi. And for the first round, we're going to give you 2 minutes. There's going to be an asker and an answerer. The asker, your job is to ask a follow-up question, so following up on something they just said, every time you talk, every turn of the conversation. You can respond to them naturally and share information about yourself, but you have to finish by asking a follow-up question about what they've just said.
So they've got to ask questions for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So it's essentially a 2-minute interview.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But this is going to lead somewhere else later.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Okay. So we'll do.
So take 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, never-ending follow-ups.
Everybody got a partner? There you go. What's that?
Strangers or
Anybody you like.
rare that you and so many I've been in school for 100 years and no one's ever talked to the person next to me. And I don't even know their name. Like I've been sitting next to the same person or in the same row as somebody. I don't know them.
So what you said a moment ago about we're all little scientists of the conversation.
That's probably true.
What?
Second nature.
I like that. They're charming. Or the opposite. They're bold.
We're not dissecting the dynamic.
They aren't separating skill from the character of the person. They just attributed them.
That's right. I like this person, I don't like this person. I do want to talk to them again, I don't want to talk to them again. Yeah. Or even more often than that, they'll say, I was bad. I didn't mean to be
No one's ever broken up with you before?
I wondered if you caught that.
Not only did I catch it, it's true to me.
I think you told me
I've
that
broken
before.
up with so many girls, and no one's ever broken up with me. And I think part of the reason is
Talking. It's a good It's a key
It's like they want more.
Yes.
And
Dying for it.
yeah, not dying, but it's just never gets so bad they want to leave.
That's right.
That's probably true for you too.
I think so. Yeah.
My daughter, Quinn and Pat, both see it as a character. Like
That's interesting.
that no one's ever broken up with me.
It is a character. In a way, it is. My mom always worried about me that I hadn't faced enough failure, that I would never learn to be rejected.
You keep track of that, Mary?
Yeah.
But also that somehow you're preserving your options in a way the person in a relationship is not. And somehow you do not expose yourself the way they have.
Yeah.
You've done some squirreling emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Okay, we'll cut them off.
Here we go.
If you had to describe that experience in one word, shout it out, how would you describe it? Fun, amazing. What else? Interesting, informative. What else? Pleasurable. Ooh. Genuine. Now, isn't that ironic? We're all in on it. We know that it was sort of not genuine, and yet in the experience of it unfolding, even though we're all in on the shtick, it still feels terrific.
So we're going to stick a pin in this.
Yes.
Because there are some things I just want to know more about.
Okay.
But first thing, this is an interview, right? This isn't. It's not exactly the way you and I would just talk.
Right.
When we talk, we go.
Yeah.
Right. But this is a little different. We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying to achieve something. What is the difference between an interview and a conversation?
There's a lot different. I mean, every conversation has very unique contextual factors. Usually when you and I talk, there's not an audience of people. Also, when you're in a specific context like this and there's lights in your face, there's assumptions and norms about who's supposed to say what. You're supposed to give some sort of charming introduction, and then you ask me questions, and I share my expertise and my answers, and everybody learns, and it's great. That's not how a one-on-one conversation would work between the two of us. It would be more ping-pongy. Presumably, I would want to learn things from you, and then you would want to learn things from me. We want to laugh together. So every conversation has different norms and assumptions like
A couple
that.
of directions I want to take it in. But the first is because I'm just dying to get to it. It's not in any. This is not in any logical order. I love all the mistakes. Like
Yeah.
I love you. I think you learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
It's hard to learn from your own because you're so defensive. But you learn from when people are bad at it.
Yeah.
Like let's talk about. Give me several examples of the things people do in conversation they just should not do, and that research shows they should not do.
I have to share with our friends here. Michael's first idea for this back and forth was that we would spend the first 5 minutes trying to be the worst conversationalists that we could be.
And here's an it would go something like this. It's like what'd you think of the Dylan movie?
That's none of your damn business.
Yeah. Because I wanted to actually, I want to tell you, I saw it, and I want to tell you what I think about the Dylan
Yeah,
movie.
please do. I can't wait to hear.
No, but we don't need to do. I realize we don't need to do this because all you have to do is turn on cable news, and you can see it every day.
Yeah.
You can see, if you want to see people who are bad at conversation.
Yeah.
You just watch CNN
Or walk down the
Fox
street,
News,
or go to the corner
but
store.
We have modeled for us a lot of bad conversation.
Yeah.
But. There are things I love you when you introduced me to some of the vices. I've now become aware of my own, how I engage in them.
Do you think it helps you to know them?
I'm instantly aware when I boomer ask what I just did.
Yeah.
When I ask a question that really I want you to ask me. How many copies of your book have you sold?
Oh,
No,
thank
it's
you,
just
Michael. How about you?
No.
Do tell.
No, but it's that. There's research that shows that people pick up. They hear it at a dinner party. Someone introduces a conversation,
Yeah.
and it's not genuine. They ask a question because what they really want to do is drag the conversation
Yeah.
to this stop so they can pontificate.
How recently have you been skiing in Switzerland, Michael?
Yes.
And then you say, well, I've never been. Let me tell you about my trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a boomerang. So we call this boomerang.
Why do you think Kamala lost?
Right.
Yeah, you actually don't give a shit what they think.
Yeah.
You want to be able to say
Give
what
your
you think.
diatribe.
Yeah, so this is a vice that you. There's papers about this.
Yeah, it
right?
just came out. Yeah.
Didn't you write a paper partly?
I named it and wrote it.
Boomer asking?
Yes.
All right, if I didn't, I can't keep track of who did what.
Last week, it was the most read article in the Wall Street Journal, believe it or not.
Oh, I didn't realize this. You did an
Yeah.
op-ed about it, but
Yes.
you also did academic research about
At the
this.
same time.
And why is it that people hate it? Yes, I know. Like, why is it?
Here's the
people-
thing. It's not that it's bad to talk about yourself. In fact, that's where good relationships come from. You have to do mutual sharing, vulnerability, self-disclosure. The problem with something like boomer asking, where you ask a question, let someone answer, and then immediately bring it back to yourself, is that it's showing them that you really weren't listening to what they were saying. When someone shares something, it's such a gift. You need to honor that gift even for a moment to say, hey, I hear what you just said. I care about it. I want to know more. Maybe just one follow-up question before you bring it back to yourself and start sharing your own perspective. Otherwise, it feels completely insincere. Like you were just using them as a thin veil on your self-interest to just go on a diatribe.
So, can I argue?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
of course.
You teach these to very self-interested, ambitious, aggressive Harvard Business School students.
Yes.
And then they practice it upon other people.
Yes.
And they know now to behave in this way.
Yes.
Is it any less insincere?
So we talk about this a lot in the class, and I think we just experienced it in this exercise, right? The question of authenticity, there are these fleeting moments where you confront in conversation and you realize, oh, I should ask a question right now, or I haven't asked anything yet, or, oh boy, I think this topic's getting boring. How do I make it more interesting and fun? Or, ooh, I'm feeling myself get a little angry, or they're seeming a little angry. So these moments where you have these little mini epiphanies, and you think sort of explicitly to yourself, I should do something right now. And my students, what they say is, now, is that authentic if I am explicitly thinking about it and aware that I'm about to do a thing? If I'm about to ask a question on purpose, if I avoid boomer asking on purpose, if I'm making a joke on purpose. The thing that's so beautiful about conversation and this role of authenticity is that anything you do, even if in that fleeting moment you're doing it because you feel like you should do it, everything that comes after is sincere. I ask you a question, you're really going to answer it. And then there might be a little golden nugget in it that I really want to follow up on. And that fleeting moment of inauthenticity is so quickly behind us that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it came from. We're going somewhere else.
That's why I'm always charmed by you, even though I know you're manipulating me.
Exactly.
Even though I know the moment you got out of the car 4 hours ago at my house and you started charming me all over again, and I thought she's doing it again and it's coming out of her playbook, and I couldn't defend myself.
Yeah.
I just sat there spewing about myself in response to questions you were asking.
It's not your fault, you're defenseless.
And loving you even more each moment. And I don't know. So, all right. I just want to go through a couple more of the vices, some of which I've forgotten, but I remember another one, and I loved it. I think we talked about this on the podcast. Humble bragging.
Oh, it's a good one.
It's a good one because it's even worse. Explain what it is and explain how it's different from bragging, and explain why people what evidence there is that people hate it.
There's a whole suite of these sort of bad behaviors. Boomer asking, I would put in this category. Humble bragging. Another one is backhanded compliments. So it's when you're trying to achieve more than one thing at once. You want to brag, but you know that it's not cool to straightforwardly brag. It's not okay to be so overt about your braggadocio to people. You want to give someone a compliment, but you also know that doing so might make you look incompetent or low power. So you're trying to give them a compliment and also maintain your own high status. It's like we're trying to do too many things at once and we compromise on all of them. So a humble brag is when you brag and in the same breath you are also complaining. Like, oh, my hand hurts so much from signing autographs. Okay? Or, God, I can't believe how many men hit on me when I'm wearing sweatpants. It's like too many things smushed together and it's the whole thing combined is so icky. Yeah. Backhanded compliments, it's like you're trying to give a compliment, but you are, instead of just saying, Michael, I love being with you, you're so smart, I would say something like, you're so surprisingly smart for an author. Or you're really in tune with pop culture for someone your age, right? It's taking a real compliment and making salient that you're in some sort of distribution of a comparison set, and it's an undesirable comparison set. Saying like you're at the top of some distribution of people, but it's like not a great group to be in. And people do it all the time. They qualify their compliments in this way instead of just saying, I really admired how you asked that question, or I loved your presentation. Here's what I loved about it. You say that was a great presentation for an intern. And it undercuts it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Ever.
Yeah.
Right. But what's intriguing to me is the academic studies about this.
I know.
Mike Norton led one of these, our friend.
He was humble bragging. He did this with Oval Caesar, who's at Cornell.
And how do they do it? Explain the study.
So there are many ways to study these types of things. You can do it by having a scenario where you say, imagine these people, and you randomly assign them to read a scenario where someone gives a humble brag, or randomly assign them to see just a straightforward brag. And it's just this hypothetical scenario. Another way you could do, and then you measure things like, how much do you like this person? How sincere do they seem? Would you like to work with them on a team? Would you like to be in a romantic relationship with them? So all kinds of outcomes. What I like to do, and what has been very innovative in the sort of methods of studying these things, is actually bringing real people together and saying, okay, both of you have a live conversation, just like we did with never-ending follow-ups, and you sort of give an intervention to somebody, like, you are going to ask questions at every turn of this conversation. And now we could go out to all of you and say, How fun was that? How much did you enjoy it? How much do you want to talk to this person again? How sincere did it feel? Do you want to collaborate with them? Do you want to go on a date with them? There's all kinds of important outcomes now that you could measure about those things.
And when you're humble bragging, none of the good things happen.
None of the good things happen.
Tell me about this. I'm sorry to digress, but I want to hear more about what you were doing last night, because you do a lot of this.
It's none of your damn business, Michael. We were at the other location.
I love one of the things I love about you is you actually never say that.
Never.
You never say no.
No.
You never say I won't go there.
Yeah. What could someone possibly ask that wouldn't be fun to talk about? Or is fun to dodge, at least?
You don't shut down.
No.
You pick up and go some other
Bring
place.
it on.
Last night.
Yeah, last night I was at there's a beautiful location of Book Passage in downtown San Francisco in the Ferry Building. I'd never been there before. If you haven't been, gorgeous, go there. I brought you shortbread cookies from the Ferry Building. And it was organized by Shannon Lundgren, who is here. Hi, Shannon. Hi, Shannon. Shannon is a professional matchmaker, and Shannon reached out to me, and we said, why don't we organize a session where we can talk about the book, about talk, about the psychology of conversation, how can we do it better, with a group of singles and couples, and then we give them an hour to mix and mingle and get to actually put those conversation skills into action. And it was a total blast. It was so fun.
When you teach people matchmaking skills before a matchmaking event, is there evidence that they make more matches?
That's a great question. It's sort of similar to teaching a course at a business school about how to do a good job interview and then send your students out to job interviews, or teach people how to be a good collaborator and then watch them collaborate. I will tell you, and this is probably true for the people who were at the session last night, but it's certainly true of my students. When you read a book like Talk, or you hear a session like this, it makes you hypervigilant about the content of your conversation in a way that can feel sort of uncomfortable, and maybe you don't do that naturally. It makes you hyper aware, a little more self-conscious. That's what learning feels like, by the way. You become more aware of what you're doing and a little bit more thoughtful and reflective of, like, is that good or not good? So there is this hypervigilance, and then the hope and the goal is that over time, if you keep playing around and experimenting with questions, with levity, with topic switching, whatever, you find things that work really well for you or don't, and the things that work well become more habitual, and you don't have to experience that hypervigilance anymore.
You just brought up a couple of things that are just sort of like, they're in the acronym, topic switching and levity. And we ought to just tell them what the acronym stands for, because that will relieve everybody of a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
They know at least what they're supposed to be learning.
Okay, yes. So the acronym is TALK. T is for topics. A is for asking. L is for levity. Levity meaning humor and warmth. The queen of levity standing in the back, by the way. Hi, Jennifer. K is for kindness. And it's an important acronym. It's very intentionally quite simple because, and we describe this in the book, conversation is remarkably complex, so much more complex than it first appears. For something we learn to do as toddlers and practice doing all our lives that feels second nature, like why would you think so much about a thing that you just do naturally? When you look under the hood and you actually dive into what's going on, it is a remarkably complicated coordination game. Of course we get it wrong all the time. Of course we miscoordinate. And I hope that one of the main takeaways from the books is that it's just, you should feel comforted by how actually complicated it is, and more forgiving of yourself and other people when it doesn't go well.
You know, what's odd about you is, sorry,
Thanks so much.
I probably just made a mistake. But is the kind of person who would be naturally drawn to this subject and teaching this subject, I would have thought would be someone who naturally had problems, that they became aware that there were problems and they overcame their problems. You came out of the womb being able to do this beautifully. I
did not.
You did not?
Nobody does.
I don't believe
No
it.
one knows how to even speak when they come out of the womb.
But yeah, I have a feeling you did.
No. This is important.
You came out with a question.
This is important
Yeah.
because it is an important misconception about people who become good communicators, good talkers, is that they were born that way or that they have always been that way. And first of all, no one is born a good communicator. They may have natural proclivities that make them better at learning strategies, and then they get in these upward spirals where they practice good habits over time. I do think I had a natural advantage, though.
A twin.
I had a twin. I have an identical twin, And as you know, having an identical twin gives you a lot more feedback. So part of the reason we can't all get good at conversation is because you don't know what's going well and not well. You don't know what to repeat and not repeat.
We have feedback problems.
Feedback problems. But with a twin, you get to watch a weirdo version of yourself walking through the world, interacting with people. You see when she does something amazing and you're like, I got that. I can do that. You see when she makes mistakes and you're like, I can avoid that. It's almost more than double the feedback that non-twins get.
Can you think of a single example of when you saw your twin make a mistake and you learned from it or did something well?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me.
So many. I mean, every moment of just one. Okay,
Just
fine,
one.
just
This
one.
one. I want a specific example.
Rejecting boys when they asked her out.
Oh.
So
All right.
she was so direct and harsh. And I just always thought that was so mean. And there are nicer ways to reject people.
Show me.
Michael, I love talking to you. You're so wonderful. I'm not available right now.
I'm already starting to cry.
But she would just be like, hell no, get out of my face. You know, like way too harsh. Almost, it's so harsh, it's almost funny. But it's like little cuts, right? It's not any one story. It's 1,000
Sure. Did she
moments.
do the same thing with you? If I went to her, is she a great talker? Did she learn because of all your mistakes?
She just
Or
told
were you-
she just told a story 2 days ago. I was at a book launch event at Harvard, and she told this story of how. And I didn't even know she noticed this. I'll be talking to somebody like this and getting into it, getting silly. And if I'm at a restaurant, the waiter comes and I turn and I'm like a completely different person. I'll be like, hi, yes, I am ready to order. Thank you so much. And it was sweet. She said, she does it because she's trying to undo all the injustices of how people treat serving staff, but it is so ridiculous. And I was like, yes, I do that. Yes, you're right. And I had never notice that about myself. And she's telling, an audience of hundreds of people. Yes. So we still do it. It continues now.
So the feedback problem. This is interesting. You're right.
Yeah.
We think we get feedback.
Yeah. A little bit. You get leaks here and there.
But you don't hear what people are saying behind your back.
And you don't
Except
get
now
high
on
you don't
Twitter.
get high fidelity
Right.
accurate
Right.
feedback. When people laugh at you, it is not necessarily because you're being hilarious. There are so many other purposes that laughter serve. They're being polite, they're smoothing awkwardness, they're filling pauses, they're just trying to make you feel better, and you leave feeling like that joke was hilarious. and it's just probably not right. Particularly, imagine a high status male boss who's just walking around telling jokes and everybody has to laugh at them. And so he's getting no feedback, real feedback.
He's getting the wrong feedback.
He's getting the wrong feedback. Yeah, that's scary.
Doesn't know it.
And doesn't know it.
Doesn't want to know it.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe doesn't want to know. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Let's pause on this, on levity.
Yeah.
Because of all every part of the acronym, was the hardest for me to get my mind around you in a classroom teaching.
Yeah.
These
Me too.
Harvard Business School students.
Me too.
Not that they're not funny. I'm sure some of them are funny.
No, many of them are deeply unfunny.
Yeah. And it's like, what can you teach?
Yeah.
What can you put in that God left out?
Yeah. Humor is the thing of all conversation skills that I think I have the most curiosity about. How can you teach it? How can you best teach it? Can you teach it? I start the module in the class by saying, I cannot make you funny. I cannot make you funnier. Their faces fall. They're so sad. But then we get to a point where we can talk about the mindsets that funny people inhabit, the types of strategies, the types of things they think about, the strategies, and then we bring in wonderful people like Jennifer Rocker and Naomi Bagdonas to come in and talk about these humor strategies. But a really important part of learning about levity is realizing the goal to be funny is not the right goal. A lot of people put pressure on themselves like, oh, I need to be funny. That's a very self-focused goal. Conversation is a very collaborative, co-constructed effort. What's more productive is thinking, how can I make this fun? How can I make this fun for you and me together? The how can I be funny is a lot of pressure and often counterproductive.
All right, give me some tips.
Okay.
I want some tips.
Well,
I can guess, but I want your tips.
I would love to hear your guesses too.
That's why I said it. I want you to want to hear my guesses.
Tell me your guesses.
My guesses?
Yeah.
It's approaching the whole thing in spirit of play.
Yeah.
It's introducing games.
Yeah.
It's irony in the classic sense, saying the opposite of what's true.
Yeah.
Doing things that break the pressure or the static quality of what's the feeling in the room.
Yeah.
And
breaking the pace.
You can do almost anything.
Yeah.
It's just like it just something that sort of like breaks the ice in the room, and gives everybody permission for this to be fun. Teasing.
Yep.
Teasing in the right way.
Yep.
Is great. Teasing the wrong way is not so great.
Yeah, can't punch down. The idea of teasing and breaking the pace and sort of breaking the rules is an old idea. There's this old, linguistic philosopher, Paul Grice, who had these rules of conversation that would describe what a very efficient, rational, good conversation should sound like. It's relevant, clear, succinct, and honest. And when you look at it, you're like, no conversation achieves that. And actually, ultimately, his point before his very untimely early death is that the flouting of these rules is when conversation gets really good. It's when when you break the rules, you're purposefully irrelevant. I start talking about the Kardashians, and you go there with me, and that's so fun, right? Or I tease you and say something ironic, and you understand that it's ironic and that it's a little irrelevant and it's a little dishonest because I'm doing it with cheeky good intentions. But everybody has to be in on the flouting. Everybody has to understand, like, there is a rule and I'm purposefully breaking it for our benefit. That's when levity's really good.
I want to know what happens when you do this with the Harvard students. Like, this is an impossible question for you to answer, but I want you to try it anyway. Give me the snapshot of the student, the perfect student. I mean, the perfect case study to show that your course has some value for them. Yeah. How are they different in the end?
Yeah.
Humor-wise.
Yeah. So
what happens?
I make sure I not only have anecdotes about it, as a scientist, I measure it. So on the first day of class, I have them do an exercise where they have a 10-minute conversation with a partner and they share something very hard that happened to them, a story that's very of a struggle in their life. And then they do a levity.
Do this publicly?
One-on-one with each other.
Okay.
They record it on their phone and have it automatically transcribed. Then they do a levity reframe where they try and tell the same story, but with humor and with more lightness.
God, that must be brutal to listen to.
Oh, I can't. I mean, you can't imagine how bad it is at the beginning of the semester. They can't do it. Most of them can't do it. Some are good. Like out of 90 students, let's say 3. Right. Okay. By the end, then at the end of the semester, you have them do exactly the same challenge with exactly the same partner. You record it again, you transcribe it, and they're better at it. And it's measurably better. There's more laughter. There's more things that outsiders would rate as actually funny happening during the conversation. And so this is the science. This is the science part of it. You can measure it.
How many of your students come away saying, thank you for giving me yet another weapon in my arsenal. I'm going to go take over the world with this and make a lot of money. Or how many of them say, God, you just made my life better?
Yeah.
Do you get both?
There is no superpower that cannot also be used for evil.
Yeah.
The final spiel that I give on the last day of class is about using this superpower for good. It's why the course was originally called How to Talk Gooder. It's cheeky. It's cheeky and meant to be silly, but also it's about goodness, using this like morally for good to help other people achieve what they need to achieve and not using it to exploit people. But ultimately, that's up to them.
Do you have a sense that some are listening and some aren't?
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You mentioned Paul Grice. I'm going to open it up for audience questions in just a minute. But the book's really good.
Thank you.
Really good.
Thank you.
It's you on the page. It's great.
Thanks.
But I didn't realize until I read it that there was actually, and of course there is, a history of thinking about conversation. Yeah. It's not that old.
No.
You don't have to do the whole thing, but give me a sense of where it starts and what this is about.
The book starts, the first chapter, I tried to weave the tale of the sort of history of how conversation itself has evolved over time, starting around the 1700s, and at the same time how the science of conversation, or studying how people talk to each other, has evolved over the last few centuries. it starts in the 1700s because that was called the Age of Conversation. And it was called the Age of Conversation because up until that point, with these kings and queens and these dynasties, monastic rule, they told people how to converse. They told them what to talk about and how to talk about it, mostly to laud the ruler. And in the Age of Conversation and the sort of Renaissance part of Age of Enlightenment, part of what was so exciting is that people realized, oh, we don't have to do what the king and queen tell us to do. We can talk to who we want to talk to about the topics we want to talk about in the ways we want to talk about them. And at the time, it was so subversive. And then as industry and people came into cities instead of in rural places, there was more social mixing. And then you have to figure out, well, how do you talk to highfalutin, high-class people or people who are lower class? How do we do that? Well, how are we going to figure that out? And so then things have sort of just evolved since then until now, when we are still trying to figure out what are the rules here as I move from texting my friends and emailing and I'm sitting in a room with a very diverse set of people and I'm then face to face with somebody. What are the rules here? What are we allowed to talk about and what's the best way to do it?
And very smart people established some very specific rules for the conversations that would happen inside their houses. Kant.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
I read that. I thought I was just blown away.
Me too.
And there was a kind of 4.0 stupid about it.
Yeah.
It was like, he's really smart and this is really stupid.
Totally.
But what explained to me,
So Immanuel Kant was this very well-respected philosopher. For much of his life, he was a bit of a pauper. He didn't have his own home. He lived in a public boarding house. He ate at the sort of communal tables and got really annoyed with this boisterous and sort of banal conversations that he found there. So finally, towards the end of his life, when he could afford to buy his own home, he was like, that's it. I'm going to have these dinner parties and I'm inviting who I want to be there. We're going to talk in the ways that I want to talk. I make the rules. And he had all of these very specific rules. He would have no more than 6 to 8 people. It had to be a mix of professions. So there would be, a physician, clergy, philosopher, and then, a restaurateur from the middle of town. The dinner parties became very famous and sort of coveted to get the invitation to go. And there were very clear rules. There was no shop talk, no lulls, no music, no beer, no wine.
Why were these invitations so coveted?
They must have been a blast.
You think so?
It must have been.
It doesn't read like a blast.
But I know, it sounds so controlling, but I think at the time it was subversive because they had all been used to either having these sort of lowbrow, meaningless interactions or sort of bowing to the king and queen and doing as they were told. So this new version of the middle ground of like, well, what do we want to talk about and who do we want to talk about it with and what makes it fun? The great irony is that his philosophy largely focused on the idea of autonomy. And so he has these dinner parties where he's having all these stringent rules about how you can and can't behave. He's like stripping everyone of their autonomy. Yeah.
Topic switching.
Good.
So that's what I wanted. Let's talk a little bit
That's
about
a
that,
good one.
and then I want to kick it to the audience for a little bit.
Okay, here's a good one to take with you. In addition to asking more questions, especially follow-up questions, which are a superpower, topic switching is another good one. A big way that we see people fail in conversation is stagnating too long on any one topic.
Because I think it's rude to kind of take it another
Correct.
direction, or they're not imagining something else.
Yeah,
This
it comes
is-
from a good place.
This is where ADHD comes in very handy.
Woo woo! Shout out!
Yeah, no,
Shout out!
your mind is already off somewhere else, and you just drag everybody else where you're going.
It's so funny. I've talked to probably 40 podcasters over the last month for book promotion, and literally maybe 38 out of 40 of them all have ADHD. It's the reason that they have come to do this is that they are good at it. They're good at topic switching. They're good at moving through things quickly. So topic switching. When we think of small talk, actually, the problem isn't with small talk topics themselves. It's that people tend to stay on them for too long. You get lost in the boring sauce of meaningless chatter, and you'd miss opportunities to move on to more meaningful, personal, exciting other doorknobs into more interesting rooms. So topic switching, the mindset that you should have is just switch more. If you have that mindset, we're able to do it. As soon as you start to pick up on something getting boring or disinteresting, longer pauses, uncomfortable laughter, if people start to repeat things they've already said, so redundancies, very clear cue that you need to move somewhere else. But it takes a little bit of courage to be the topic leader and go there. But it makes it more enjoyable, more interesting, more engaging.
It's a risk, because the risk is, especially if you're talking with one person, they think you're not listening to them because you move on to something else.
Yeah.
Your mind is somewhere else.
Yeah. But affirm them first. This topic has been great. Let's talk about the Kardashians.
All right, let's open it up for just a little bit. And there we have a little game to play.
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Come around to you. So thank you for this topic, and it's such a wonderful evening. I really appreciate you. I'm interviewing for a job, and I need to hire several people, and they are not they don't have to be terribly well educated. It's a retail position, but I have to create a team that is compatible and, for me anyway, fun. I don't want to be around anybody. What are the questions that you most think are effective in getting the best employees? I know that's so general.
No, it's a great question.
Thank you.
I think there can be a little bit, we have an instinct to think, what are the right questions? What are the right starting points or launch pads? I'm going to push you to reframe a little bit that great conversationalists, yes, try to choose good topics, but make any topic good. So it's less about where you start and where you take it together. You see things like this all the time on LinkedIn, right? It's like, don't ask this question, ask this question. And I always want to chime in and say, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, how do they answer it? What follow-up question do you ask next? What joke do they say on the next turn? It's all of the unfolding decisions that come after that will make it good or bad. Now, there are some launch pads, some topics or questions that people will automatically be more engaged with if it feels more personally relevant. So questions like, what are you excited about lately? Or what scares you about this job? Or they might ask you, what do you love in a colleague, right? What makes your life better, and how can I be that? Questions that tug and pull for people, like, what do you need? That's a great question. Because it's really in action, you trying to understand their mind and what they want and need.
Best job interview. Can I interrupt?
Please.
Best job interview I ever had. I was interviewing for a job to lead teenage girls through Europe. I was 22 years old, just out of Princeton, and it was like they should never have hired me. But they hired the guy who did it. It was a fancy tour company in New York. He said, "Come to the office on this day at this hour," and I get there. His name was Robbie Brown. Robbie Brown is waiting for me, and he says, "God, I'm so sorry, I forgot we were doing this, and we've got to move the furniture. I'm moving from this office to this office down the hall. Could you just help me?" And we moved all his furniture down the hall. And at the end of it said, "We're out of time. I'll call you back and we'll do the interview another time."
Oh, that's so good.
And so
That's so good.
instead, I got a call saying, "You're hired."
Yeah.
Like fast forward 3 months later, I'm in a hotel room in Bruges with my co-leader, and I said, I never actually had an interview. I went and saw Robbie, and I moved the furniture from one hall, and he said, "I moved that furniture back from that room to that room," and so the thing was, it was doing something with the person revealed so much that you just don't get when people are in a conversation, especially a job interview. They're kind of defensive. They're kind of they're worried about doing the wrong thing. You just loosen them up by doing something with them.
Yeah.
You get the sense of whether this person's going to be helpful, collaborative, all kinds of stuff comes out.
And
right?
the dream would be if that task is actually related to what they're going to be doing on the job. We have a little bit of research about conversational job interviews. What we find is like almost nothing that people say during a job interview predicts at all how they're going to do on the job. What is a little more predictive is their energy. So to this point, like what sort of positive energy, what types of jokes are they making? What types of questions are they asking? What compliments are they giving? How are they making you feel while you're interacting? That's how they're going to make people feel once they're in the job. And it's much more predictive than like, what's your greatest weakness? Like, who cares? Yeah.
All right, we have a question here.
Yeah, thank you. This is really interesting, and it seems closer. Sorry. Very intuitive, a lot of what you're saying, but what I am wondering about is, since the pandemic, a lot of these conversational things, especially in the workplace and also interpersonally, are not happening in a live space. And I struggled mightily, like with the move to Slack and the move to like remote work, because Zoom is not a natural place to have. There's a lot of the things that you're saying just don't happen on Zoom. So I was just curious, have you studied that at all? Like, what's sort of the next phase, and how to teach that to your students?
Great question. Yes. So we've been thinking and studying recently is, yes, you can compare modes of communication. So what is rich and rewarding about Zoom versus in person? That's a sort of very basic question. Zoom is not as rewarding. It does not feel as real. It's not as connective. It's not as memorable. It's good for transactional things, so exchanging information, but people care about so many more things than just exchanging information. But if you just need to exchange information, it's great. What becomes a sort of second order, more interesting question is what is happening to the adult mind as we toggle up from Zoom? What our friends are texting us at the same time, our emails pinging, and 800 things are coming in. Your kid comes in and you have to talk to them face to face. Somebody calls you. We're toggling across these modes of communication constantly. Each one of them differs in terms of synchronicity. So is there another human being live on the line, or are they asynchronous? And information richness. Are you getting words? Are you getting sounds, the acoustic property of their voices? And are you getting nonverbals, their body language, what they're wearing, what shoes they have on? And they all differ. The interactions that feel real are the ones that happen synchronously. So a phone call feels real because there's a real person there, but of course in person is so much more rich and rewarding. And I think scientists don't quite know yet what this toggling life is doing to our brains. We hear a lot in public discourse about how it's harming children and that they shouldn't have devices in school. But I suspect that probably the same is true for adult brains too, and it's probably not great. Yeah.
I am very curious about the idea of kind teasing. In my entire life, I have never observed such a thing. If we have this spectrum from cruel on one end and kind on the other, I've seen teasing approach the middle, but I've never seen it go past to the kind stage. Never even been around people who claim to be enjoying teasing each other. And it sure sounds mean to me what they're saying. So what is an example of kind teasing?
You don't mind repeating that?
The question was, what is it an impossible oxymoron to think of kind teasing? If there's a spectrum from bullying, mean, making fun of someone, punching down, all the way over to kind teasing, she hasn't seen a lot of examples in life of actually, like maybe it gets to the middle, but never to the end. Girl, I love your skepticism. I think it is so charming and arresting and provocative, and I just, you go. You're so amazing. That's kind teasing. I'm giving you positive feedback in a way that feels really connective and sort of filled with levity.
What your sister did with you when she's describing you at a restaurant.
Exactly.
She's noticing.
Yeah, she's noticing. They're giving you, it's loving, it's noticing something real and rooted in truth, but the delivery of it, the intention of it is to make you feel both informed, but also sort of propped up and not feel bad about it. It's hard to do. It's an advanced conversational skill, and you're right, you don't see it a lot, but it's the kind of thing that, this is the kind of thing that we're trying to teach our smart students at Harvard to get better at. They're not good at it. They tend to be more snipery and mean, and it's something you gotta work on. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
we have another question back here.
Alison, very, very interesting. I see a ring on your finger from the back row. So this is great with a group that you meet in a party or whatever. When you go into the house and you try this, does your spouse say, "You're not running that on me again, are you?"
My poor husband, Derek. What a fascinating partner to live with, for sure. I think probably living with any behavioral scientist or psychologist is quite an experience. I am lucky to have a husband who is a good sport, very calm, very secure and confident. And so I think if you asked him that question, and he's been asked that question, he would say that he's really learned a lot from me and from this research. It's made him a better question asker. It's made us better as a couple about managing conflict. There's a whole chapter in the book about difficult moments, and you know, hearing from a Harvard Business School professor about difficult moments, you go to this place of thinking about negotiations or giving feedback. But really, I think it's most relevant in your house, at home, with your family, with your friends. Because even in conversations that seem like they should be easy and casual or very fun, there are these moments where somebody snips at somebody, or you confront and you realize, oh, we really disagree about this, or he's really mad about this thing, or he's chewing on some resentment about something. And how you react in those moments is incredibly meaningful. It's like you could have death of a marriage by 1,000 cuts, and these little moments of how defensive are you, how receptive are you to these little moments of feedback, what is the language that you should use in those moments, and can you develop skills to move apart from each other instead of getting into a combative back and forth. So I think and hope he would say it's great. But it's a great question.
Let's do one more, and
one
then
last question.
We want to do something else before we.
Hi, Alison. I have a question for you.
Hi, Laura.
Hello, Michael. So in all of this, I think one of the things in the book, which is just fabulous, you also talk about how hard it is in a group, once you get into a bigger group. I'm curious about at a dinner party, what's your sort of magical formula for inviting the right people? And do you have dream guests? Michael might have one as well, that would come to your dinner party, and they can be alive or not alive.
Oh, what a great question.
I didn't hear the last part. They could be a what?
Alive or not alive? I want to hear your answer to this
No,
question.
no. This is your show. But it's so your dream guest. So this is like a college
And
essay.
how would you? And she's asking us if we were Kant and we were designing like the dinner party but our version today. What would it look like? What are some strategies and who's coming? There's a whole chapter in the book called Many Minds, the kerfuffle of many minds. I think as a starting point, just being a little bit more aware that as soon as a third person joins a conversation, it is no longer the same task. One-on-one conversation is a categorically different thing than group conversation, and all of the coordination challenges that happen one-on-one just multiply exponentially. So just coming from a place of saying, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a shit show. Like we're going to make mistakes. It's going to be awkward. We're going to partition into subgroups. We're going to come back together. Somebody's going to dominate the airtime. Somebody's going to say something that nobody else is interested in. All of those things are very difficult to manage and almost impossible to avoid. So a little bit coming from a place of give yourself a little grace about dinner parties being weird. But if you're a good steward of the group, a good host, I think the people you invite and how you think they'll relate to each other, the energy that they're going to bring really matters. And then I really like activities or just assigning somebody to prepare a toast or something that centralizes the conversation to something joyful. This guy would be on my list.
So here's
dream
an example
guests.
of what you just said. Actually, we just did this. We right before New Year's Eve, we had a weird dinner party where the kids brought their friends. Ooh. So there were no other real grown-ups. I guess Quinn's 25, so she's a grown-up. But there were a lot of younger people. My son is a senior at Marin Academy, and he brought a couple of Marin Academy kids, and they'd never been to a dinner party. And so the question was like, how are you going to make this work? And I had everybody go around the table and give their New Year's resolutions and their New Year's predictions. Right. But the predictions were the big things. Like what's going to happen and it was a game. It became a game, and age went away. Yeah. Everybody. It just created a different kind of collaborative environment.
Gamifying is always the right
good.
answer.
Always good.
Yes.
Always. It's always good. The opposite of this, the worst dinner parties I've ever been to, are orchestrated by important people who want to have other important people.
Can I give an example?
You go first.
Oh,
you go, girl.
Michael. I know. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I have a vivid memory of I was sitting in a room with a lot of fancy faculty, behavioral scientists, two of whom, well, maybe that's too identifying, two of whom had won a Nobel Prize. And we were sitting around, and the person organizing the event insisted that we have one conversational thread. There were probably 20 people all in this big square. And so it just reverted to this conversation between the most important high status men in the room with all of these other very creative, funny, dynamic people sort of pushed to the margins, feeling like they're not allowed to talk. And then the mid-range status members would like pipe in with an idea, and they were immediately dismissed and ignored. It felt like an SNL skit of some sort was happening. And so then you just see people quietly start to like try and sneak out and leave, but everybody was trapped in this room. It was wild. And it's a room filled with such fabulous people with such wonderful ideas. The failure is that you're not like leveraging that. You're not tapping into it by partitioning into subgroups, by gamifying.
But what you said, you put your finger on something. Status structure at the party screws things up.
Yeah.
And so an ideal dinner party guest is someone who doesn't have obvious status, who's great at undermining the status of the old, and make them a little scared, and make everybody realize that
who doesn't give a shit.
We're not putting up with this status structure.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of that.
That was part of the problem, because all the low status people in the room felt like they needed to sort of kowtow to the high status people. But if you brought in someone who didn't even know who anybody was, they would have been like, what is this garbage? Yeah, let's play a game.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's do, we're over time, but let's do that.
Okay, we have one more game. Are you guys up for it? One more conversation. So earlier we did never-ending follow-up questions. One of the most powerful conversation skills that we talk about in the book, and a really powerful way to show people that you've listened to them, is by doing callbacks. So a callback is referencing back to anything that was said earlier in the conversation or earlier in your relationship. I'd like you to turn back to the person that you talked to earlier. You learned a lot about each other through never-ending follow-ups. I want you to try and do a callback to something that you talked about earlier in your conversation. I want you to start on a totally unrelated topic. Let's talk about your favorite food. The Kardashians here. I don't know if it's relevant for everybody. We'll start talking about your favorite food, and while you're talking about your favorite food, try and sneak in a callback to something you talked about earlier during never-ending follow-ups. Exactly, during the first exercise. We'll give you a couple minutes to give it a try.
It's funny how it is different from you not just talking. We can get up here and talk, and it'll be a different experience. So I saw Jennifer, and there's Naomi, and it's fun that Lauren came. It's fun that Lauren came. I'm trying to think about how to do it. Oh, it's so good. Oh, no. It's so good. I mean, it so works. It's going to go viral. Everybody's going to say, you got to watch this. If you want to know how to talk. Yeah. What happens next when they're done? What happens?
Comments from people. It is hard. In a natural way.
As much as I can remember.
A lot of my students are like that. They come to the world with a lot of stuff. Did we do it? Did we get to the callback? Yes. Oh, I see so much nodding. Oh, how did it feel when you alighted on that moment of the callback? How did it feel? Shout out a word. Affirming. What else? Shocking. Yeah, a little surprising. Funny, absolutely, because it's a little shocking. You're like, oh my God, we did the human thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's often quite funny. It often gets a laugh. Yeah. And connecting, yes, absolutely. I challenge you all to try and incorporate more callbacks. It's a sign of long-term listening and long-term care that you heard someone earlier. The only way you can do it is if you heard someone earlier, and you can show them that you heard them, and it just feels so great.
Alison Woodbrooks, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.